Talk about movies with you. Talk about movies with you. We'll learn about behind the scenes and deeper meanings, 'cause this is just a film review. Hi, and welcome to a family-friendly episode of Film Recommendations. In this episode, I'll be recommending 3 different family-friendly film features. Try saying that one 5 times fast. And anyway, I'll just get going. So the first one up is I guess I should start with Hoodwinked 2. Hoodwinked 2 features a big celebrity cast doing all the different voices for this film, and it's the sequel to Hoodwinked, which is a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood with just a wonderful plot where at first they're trying to figure out what all happened, and uh, it's it's kind of a cool little revisionist bit of storytelling, kind of like if you ever read this one particular book where it retells the wolf's point of view um, of the Three Little Pigs story. Uh, that's a particularly good one. I forget the name of it, but I remember reading it a lot as a little kid. And it kind of taught the ambiguity of storytelling, that not everything was so black and white and good and evil. Anyway, Hoodwinked is kind of along those lines. Um, and the the actress they had doing the voice of Red, I'm not sure if she was the one that they had doing the voice from Hoodwinked 1. Uh, Her name is Hayden Panettiere, and I really I don't know all the voices well enough. Usually I do, but in this case, I just didn't really bother learning who did the voice of Red in the first one. It sounded to me like it was Kirsten Dunst, really. But anyway, uh, I thought that she did an okay job, not great. Um, Really, the rest of the cast are the ones that really fill out the piece because they actually do uh, real characters, whereas Red's job is she's very two-dimensional, unfortunately. They try and give her some actual character and everything, but she's basically uh, a normal female type character. Um, yeah, they give her some motivations, but in terms of the actual acting range and everything, it's just not really there, unfortunately. And yeah, but the rest of the movie is well written, it's clever, it's funny, and it has a lot to offer adults and kids. And no real adult humor, no little risque humor that the kids won't quite get. It's enough of a level of humor that everyone will get it. And it was produced by the Weinstein Company recently, actually, and I believe it was a direct-to-video release. It may have had a short run in theaters, but I don't recall. Um, but I really liked Hoodwinked. I saw it on TV, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is a brilliant movie." I don't remember this coming out, and then I thought about it, and I said, "Oh yeah." It's one of those movies that you kind of rediscover uh, because they come out with so many. They come out with ones every summer, some CGI family-friendly, uh, computer animated film nowadays. Uh, and Hoodwinked is kind of an unnecessary sequel, but uh, and they didn't really have any further story to tell, which is kind of the way it goes with a lot of uh, a lot of filmmakers is they don't really want to tell a story. They don't want to make a sequel unless they feel they have an additional story to tell. Like with Christopher Nolan and the Batman trilogy, soon-to-be trilogy, that is coming out, and just uh, similar films. They don't want to make unnecessary sequels. And unfortunately, Pixar, which I consider one of the more original film production companies, has gone the route of making unnecessary sequels, such as Toy Story 3, which had everyone practically bawling, or in some cases literally bawling their eyes out. And uh, apparently, Cars 2 wasn't very good. And in this light, it makes me glad that they didn't make a sequel to The Incredibles, even though I thought that there was plenty of room for it, because it would just end up being disappointing at the rate they're going, unfortunately. Whereas Hoodwinked, um, kind of a kind of a side project, you know, had some great voice talent behind it. Glenn Close, Patrick Warburton, uh, who you'll know from all kinds of different roles. He kind of first got his big break with a recurring role on Seinfeld as a mechanic who got a bit too into his job, uh, and then he went on to play the Tick. He went on to the live-action version of the Tick, which was unfortunately a failed series. He went on to do numerous other voice work. Your kids will know him from The Emperor's New Groove and the sequel Kronk's New Groove, which is a direct-to-video sequel. Also, trying to think who else. Oh, what is her name? Um, Joan Cusack. Joan Cusack does the voice of a really cool character, um, and Martin Short reprises his role as the lumberjack, although his role is a little bit small in this one, unfortunately. Uh, his work on Hoodwinked actually got him, I believe, into doing The Cat in the Hat for PBS because they realized that he could do this excellent voice work. Um, and he seemed to be having a bit of a dry spell at at for a long time. I think the last thing I saw him in uh, was Jungle to Jungle back in I want to say 2002, and prior to that, a Hallmark production of Alice in Wonderland. That was pretty good, but not monumental. They did do a wonderful job with the imagery, of course, but as is typical with the Hallmark films that they were doing at that time, they were showing them uh, late in the evening, starting usually around 8 um, at night, and then going on until 11 at night. Uh, so you ended up staying up way late for when I was a little kid. I usually went to bed at 9:30. Um, and it would just be going on and on with the commercial breaks. And they did that a lot with the Gulliver's Travels, and they did a retelling of Noah starring Jon Voight, and which is kind of an odd casting decision when you think about it. And it just goes on from there. They told these really amazing stories, and you really want to watch them, and then you couldn't because you'd be half asleep by the time they were just getting done with part one. So anyway, um, I am way off topic. Hoodwinked 2 revolves around some children being kidnapped by a wicked witch, and while they're uh, while Granny and Wolf are trying to rescue the kids, uh, Granny ends up getting kidnapped, and so they call Little Red Riding Hood back into into help Wolf find Granny and save the kids and everything. And there are so many plot twists. I don't want to spoil them for you, um, but uh, this one has uh, some cleverness that the grown-ups and the teenagers will appreciate and not find dull or uninteresting. Um, they kind of slowed down Twitchy the squirrel so that he was a little bit more understandable, whereas in the first film he was really hyper. Um, and I actually think I liked Hoodwinked, the original one, a lot better. They bring back the singing Billy Goat character. Um, so they basically brought back all the characters. Um, Either you see them there, like you see the one bear, and they bring in some other characters. Um, the guy who played the older brother on Everybody Loves Raymond, he plays a giant uh, at at a club that's on top of a beanstalk. Yeah, they're going for the Jack and the Beanstalk giant. Anyway, he does the voice of that, and your kids will love him because they'll probably remember his voice from several children's movie. Casper, I know, was one that he did the voice of, but he was also in Night at the Museum, where he played the Easter Island head who went dum dum, you give me gum gum. Everybody loves that little bit. It was just kind of a cute little thing that they stuck in. Um, and admittedly, this is not the normal fare for me. It's not the usual intellectual entertainment that you see me go for, but I've been kind of in the mood for a little bit lighter fare, uh, and was I thought it was only good for you guys, the few people that probably view these, if you actually got some recommendations that were completely and totally family friendly, because I normally try and mix it up between the artsy, fartsy, smartsy stuff and the family friendly stuff. Anyway, so Hoodwinked 2 is cute. I got it from Blockbuster Express, and it actually came with some nice extras on the disc as well as the film itself. Uh, and I really liked that. It was fun. They had a little behind the scene thing for each of the voices. They had all kinds of cool stuff. It was fun. Um, you're able to watch it and enjoy a lot more than just the movie. You're able to see all the cool celebrities that they got to do cameos. Like one character named Heidi is actually voiced by Heidi Klum, uh, and she had a lot of fun doing the different parts. And of course, David Ogden Stiers, uh, who Star Trek fans will remember from all his roles on Star Trek. He was also um, he also played the part of Charles Emerson Winchester III on MASH. If you're familiar with that show, he was the snooty, well-to-do um, New England doctor uh, who came from a wealthy family and all that. And anyway, so that was just kind of a uh, cool thing. I love David Ogden Stiers. He's a great, fun actor, and I'm even a fan of his early work in the Neil Simon celebrity comedies back from the 70s, like Murder by Death and The Cheap Detective. Uh, Now, the next film is one that I had my eye on to watch, and I didn't want to watch it until I could also watch Hoodwink 2 because I wanted to do this kind of family-friendly episode, and it's really kind of along the same lines as Despicable Me. Now, this is the rental copy that they produced, and it has no bonus features whatsoever, even though it lists all the bonus features that you would get on a regular copy. Now, I would be fine with that, except that there seems to be this big line right in the middle. You can't see it on this camera, but there's a big line going right around in a perfect circle on the disc, and uh, among all things, right in the middle of the climax of the film, when the uh, when Gru is about to rescue the eldest girl from Vector. You know, you've probably seen this film by this point, so I'm not spoiling too much. Um, and it won't ruin anything. Right as uh, right as uh, a minion's hand reaches out to try and rescue them, um, it froze. And I was watching it on my computer, so it shouldn't have frozen. There was no reason why it should have frozen. And I'm pretty sure it would have frozen on any normal DVD player because I was just using Hewlett Packard Quick Play, nothing fancy, nothing where it would be suspicious. Uh, and anyway, so it was just acting bizarre. So, um, yeah, I'm really disappointed with Blockbuster Express because not only do they not give you any features, but then on top of that, they give you a shoddy copy that doesn't even play properly right at the climax of the film. And I don't know exactly what happens, but uh, but everything ends up okay. And basically, um, since I haven't gone into what the film is actually about, I'll tell you. Despicable Me is about a supervillain who is trying to uh, shrink the. Well, he's in competition with other supervillains to be the greatest supervillain of all time and make his name. And he does this because his mother never really appreciated anything he did. He, he wanted to be an astronaut, and his mom, so he made a helmet out of a cardboard box, and his mom was just like, meh. So then he makes a rocket out of macaroni, and his mom's like, meh. So then he builds a real rocket and launches it, and she's like, ooh, meh. So, nothing's ever good enough for her. And, you know, they they play some of the real typical stuff that they do in a lot of CGI family films these days. The minions are cute and talking talking like baby talk. They go ba 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 or something in a really high pitched voice, um, which is cute because the kids don't have to pay attention to the dialogue. They can just kind of watch the minions act silly, and they have the big eyes that make them cute, and they're happy and they're bright yellow, so um, they wear little blue overalls, and they seem to be like a genetic experiment uh, where they basically were able to produce, um, you know, hundreds of creatures that were intelligent enough to work, but were happy enough to do the work for without pay and have loyalty and everything. I loved the character of Dr. Nefarious, voiced by Russell Brand. I thought that was really great. Steve Carell does the voice of Gru, um, and Julie Andrews does the voice of the mother, although she only does a few voices. But they play another um, another old joke, which is they have the mother who's an old lady uh, at a karate lesson or something, punching a punching bag, and that's a joke that they play in Hoodwinked very early on by making Granny an extreme granny. They even kind of stylized her after the Granny in Hoodwinked with the beehive hairdo and the the horn-rimmed glasses and even the nose, although they made the nose kind of pointed down on the mother in Despicable Me, and in Hoodwinked the nose is round, and yeah, so there there are some dissimilarities, but a lot more similarities, and it's just one of those one of those little points where it's like, they could have taken it a little bit differently. Anyway, and Gru is trying to shrink the moon with a rocket, and he has to get a loan from the evil bank. But the evil bank won't give him a loan because he's older, uh, which I guess he's probably like 40 or so, 30 or 40, probably 40 when when the story takes place. And he's able to steal a shrink ray from a secret lab, and then uh, it gets stolen by another villain named Vector, who names himself after mathematics. And I won't be ruining this for you, the viewer, but it turns out that Vector is, in fact, the owner of the evil bank's son. So he's the son of the owner of the evil bank, and uh, that's why the bank owner is like, oh, well, you're too old and you've been in this game a long time and you've never been very successful, so we're going to give this guy Vector more of a chance. We're going to invest in him. And so that's why it's a bit of nepotism, um, which, that won't ruin the film for you, but it kind of gives you an idea of the setup and what it's teaching your kids. It's teaching your kids that nepotism is wrong. It's teaching your kids um, that that even if you're a bad guy, you have to be kind to those helping you. And that's the thing about Gru. Gru has people working with him. He has Dr. Nefarious, who's a mad genius who comes up with all the wonderful things that they create, and and there's wonderful little silly moments like uh, Gru is on the phone with Dr. Nefarious, and he says, "I want a dozen cookie robots to infiltrate Vector because Vector steals the shrink ray." I'm pretty sure I mentioned that. Anyway, uh, and he goes down to the lab, and he's like, "I have them for you," and some disco music starts playing, and little robots start dancing around, and the minions start dancing around with them, and Gru's just like, "What are these?" And uh, Dr. Nefarious is like, "One one dozen boogie robots, just like you ordered," and it's just like very cute, very funny, and I like the characters of the little girls. They're kind of archetypes where one is always wearing a little pink ski cap. Uh, the littlest one is very curious and asks a lot of questions and is obsessed with unicorns. And the eldest one tries to watch out for them um, and is kind of the cynic and uh, because she's had to kind of be the mom for them, for the other two, uh, at the orphanage. And of course, they're orphans, so oh, it's so sad. They need a home, and yeah, it's playing on a lot of archetypes. It's kind of rehashed storytelling elements, but it's not awful. It's not insufferable. It's something that you can actually enjoy. Steve Carell actually has a lot of fun with it, clearly. Um, Basically, it's kind of like if they took the Venture Brothers and the Monarch from the Venture Brothers and kind of adapted it into a family film um, without, you know, Dr. Girlfriend or Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, um, as she eventually becomes, and without all of the individual minions with their little issues or um, the murderous moppets or any of those types of characters. Um, and there's no heroes that he has to do battle with or anything. So it's a whole different kind of thing. But basically, they're taking the character of the monarch um, with all his minions and his subordinates. And I honestly think that they might have the Doctor Nefarious is a good example of kind of copying that 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 storytelling style, extrapolating from those old um, those old kind of science fiction mad scientist supervillain stories involving superheroes um, or spies or uh, anything involving kind of some kind of supervillain, a science fiction story or something. So Despicable Me, uh, don't bother renting it. Get the full version or something, or see about renting the full version and getting all the features or something because, like from Netflix or something, because the rental copy that Blockbuster Express gives you is crap. See maybe if Redbox gives you a better version, but Blockbuster's just disappointing. Um, some of them you get really good copies, some of them you get really bad copies. So coming up later in this episode, I'll be doing a review of Nanny McPhee Returns, the sequel. We're doing a couple sequels here. The sequel to Nanny McPhee. It has uh, it has the lead actress reprising her role, and unfortunately, being a rental copy, it doesn't come with any nice bonus extras. Um, but the menu, they load up the entire menu so you can see what you would have gotten if you had bought it. If you had bought the full version, um, which is really disappointing because uh, the the full version actually comes with um, a lot of features for Nanny McPhee Returns. You get full length audio commentary um, by I believe it's the director. Um, You get behind the scenes featurettes, deleted scenes, really amazing stuff that I, for one, enjoy as a viewer. And, uh, the deleted scenes are always fun. And the featurettes really kind of help you take a look at just how they were able to put together this story. The nice thing about the film is that it uses special effects to tell the story, and the story is wonderful. I am pleased to say that Nanny McPhee Returns is as good as the first. The first one, uh, for those who haven't seen it, I was turned on to it by by someone I knew, uh, and I forget. I think somebody borrowed a copy or owned a copy, maybe, and um, I was able to somehow borrow it. Um, anyway, so I got it somehow and watched it and was just thrilled. I was amazed at how well put together it was, how well written it was, and the actress who plays Nanny McPhee in the film, Emma Thompson, also wrote uh, uh, Nanny McPhee Returns, and it's based on on a series of novels that she really enjoyed as a child, and so what's wonderful about it is that you actually get the sense by the end of the story as if you've read the novel. So it's almost a screen adaptation of a novel, which the British are famous for doing. They've done wonderful jobs in the past with Dickens, as well as Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle novels. Speaking of nobility, Dame Maggie Smith plays Aggie, who is a character from uh, the first Nanny McPhee film, and they indicate it at the very end. So that's kind of spoiling it for you, I suppose. But um, it's a nice treat because they don't really tell you at all. They refer to her by a totally different name, and then just at the end. And Maggie Smith is a riot in this. Um, Maggie Gyllenhaal actually plays the mother in this film. Ray Fiennes plays a cameo part. So you have just amazing actors, not just British actors, but Maggie Gyllenhaal too, who really looks good in this film, better than I think she looked in The Dark Knight. I think she actually looked really, really beautiful, more so than in The Dark Knight, where everybody was like, even the Joker was saying, how beautiful she was. Um, and of course, Emma Thompson is funny and clever. The writing is just great. Uh, the children do a good job of acting without stealing the show from the other actors, and the animals do just an amazing uh, job, as do the special effects, and that's really part of the problem of acting in this computer generated age of filmmaking, is that special effects have come to take over for the acting. And unfortunately, it does take over in one scene towards the end where uh, they show uh, they show the different characters just kind of standing at the edge of a field, you know, looking up at the sky as if something is happening, and that's fine. That's what they would actually be doing, but you're not looking over their shoulder really at the magic that Nanny McPhee is doing. Instead, you're just kind of looking at the sky. And admittedly, blending shots like that, where you're looking over the shoulder of characters, it can be very expensive to do that. So perhaps as a cost-cutting measure, they isolated the special effects shots from from the actual footage in order to try and make it a little bit more cost effective, which is understandable and doesn't get in the way of the storytelling. Um, I just always find reaction shots like that to be a little um, to be a little bit of a cop out. But in this case, it's been done so much to death that there's no real point in belaboring it. As it is, excuse me. As it is, this film is fun, exciting, funny. It is easily the best family film I have seen. Uh, certainly in this round of rentals, certainly in a long time. Um, you know, uh, I was watching Corpse Bride a while back, which was kind of intended to be sort of a family film, um, but fell flat because it was so creepy and so eerie. Um, it didn't have the level of musical quality that the Nightmare Before Christmas had. It was kind of produced on a lower budget, and so as a result, they only used a few sets for it. Nanny McPhee Returns does only use a few sets, but yeah, for I was going into what Nanny McPhee was first about. Nanny McPhee takes place in the early 1800s, early to mid 1800s, and you can kind of tell by the style of dress. And um, there is a family of a widowed of a widowed husband who has uh, a couple of servants, but uh, his job doesn't quite pay enough. He works at a mortuary, as I recall, um, with a couple of very goofy twins, and then uh, his aunt, I believe it is, played by Angela Lansbury, uh, wants to see him get married, or he's going to take, I believe it's the uh, the youngest daughter uh, with her. and raise her because she wants to have the daughters raised to be proper young ladies rather than raised by their father with their brothers and acting like savages and whatnot. So uh, yeah, this uh, uh, the story kind of goes that Nanny McPhee comes in. She has magical powers basically and uses witchcraft in order to teach the children important lessons about uh, well, good morals like being kind and gentle and sympathetic to others. Uh, this Nanny McPhee story takes place during World War II, as so many stories take place. And uh, in this one, the wife of of a man who's off fighting the war, and they haven't heard from in 3 months when the story starts. Uh, they uh, she's trying to take care of her three kids, who can't really get along as it is. But then to add even further complication to it, cousins come in from London, uh, supposedly out of because the parents are afraid that the children will be hurt in the bombings. When uh, when they hint very early on that there's another reason. The children are very spoiled. Their father is a lord and a general, and so uh, the daughter has very fancy clothes and shoes. The son dresses very nicely and feels, that it's perfectly okay for him to just put down whatever, um, and knock on their way of life there in the country. Uh, uh, there's a brother-in-law who is a shyster and a gambler and is trying to get his half of the family farm that the woman and her children live on uh, out of her hands uh, so that he can use the farm as collateral to pay off a gambling debt. Um, and he's an absolute scoundrel. Um, uh, yeah, there's a small cast of characters in the whole film, but they did do a lovely job. When they did have new characters of bringing things in, they did a wonderful job of bringing in different dynamics. And I honestly recommend this film for anybody. I recommend the first Nanny McPhee as well. I think that it has become a good series, even if it's only the two films. I would love to see Nanny McPhee do more films uh, because it's just a good storyline. There's good writing, um, great production values. Of course, a lot goes into a production like that: casting, uh, designing the sets and costumes, getting actors on board for the different parts uh, when it's clear in their schedule. Of course, Maggie Gyllenhaal um, probably had to do this while filming The Dark Knight, uh, or possibly after. Uh, Probably after, since it has been a couple years since The Dark Knight came out. But fortunately, her character is no longer alive in Batman, so she wouldn't be pressed to film the sequel in Pittsburgh, um, The Dark Knight Rises. Anyway, all of that aside, Maggie Gyllenhaal is sensational in this film. Uh, Emma Thompson is excellent. Maggie Smith, Dame Maggie Smith, is amazing. Um, and yeah, it, the city kids do so much um, to cross boundaries because they feel that they're better than the country kids because apparently uh, the mother uh, comes from a well-to-do family but chose to marry a farmer's son and in so doing kind of isolated herself from the rest of the family. Uh, but she was happy, and uh, she loved the home, she loved the lifestyle, she loved her kids. It wasn't as if she was betraying her class or anything. She was simply uh, living a much more humble lifestyle out in the country. Anyway, uh, the special effects are nice. The camera angles are nothing too unexpected, and they try not to do too many quick cuts or anything. Um, but yeah, the different twists in the storyline and the plot twists are just so much fun. I honestly plan on watching this film a second time. It is so much fun. Um, Better than a lot of family films I've seen in a long time. So Nanny McPhee Returns gets a 5 out of 5, along with the original Nanny McPhee. And So the other films that I did, I might as well give those a score too. Despicable Me gets a 3 out of 5. It's not great. It relies on a lot of conventions for family films, but it's still fun and uh, and cute. And and anyone who hasn't seen it probably is wondering about it. But it's good fun, and it doesn't teach any kind of bad values. In fact, um, it kind of teaches that you know if you're feeling unworthy of love or affection, uh, you know uh, that in fact you are, and that love will bring out the best in you. And you can still go for your goals and such, but it's not all about uh, just the title kind of shows that um, that Gru doesn't really like himself. And then Hoodwinked 2, I'm gonna give a 3.5 out of 5, maybe a 4 out of 5, but I'm gonna say a 3.5 out of 5, just because um, it has a lot to offer that the original Hoodwinked had, and the original Hoodwinked easily gets a 4 or 5, a 4 out of 5, or a 4.5 out of 5. It was really good, but it did have its parts where it got really slow and hard to watch, where they would just have singing set to stuff going on, um, and it got a little bit difficult to watch. On the other hand, Nanny McPhee Returns is very touching and emotional, and will actually tug at your heartstrings just a little bit. Um, and Despicable Me will tug at your heartstrings a little bit too. So uh, all three, I would say, are really good choices. Um, I kind of knew that walking in and renting these, so I'm gonna recommend all three. Despicable Me a little bit less, Hoodwinked 2 a little bit more, and Nanny McPhee Returns and the original Nanny McPhee as well as the original Hoodwinked, um, all top recommendations for your family film viewing. So that's it for this episode of Film Recommendations. Bye bye. Continuing on the family friendly bit, I decided I would take a look at a couple of family movies, but I also got a bit more of an action comic book kind of film. So we'll be starting off with Disney's Tangled, which I had heard a lot about when it came out. I rented it from Blockbuster Express. You don't really get too many features on the rental disc. I don't know what you get on the regular for sale DVD, but this one did come with some really nice language options that I thought was kind of cool. That being said, I do have to say that this was really worth all the hype. I thought it was interesting at the start that they said that it was their 50th animated film, and I actually had to go back and think about how many, well, their 50th animated feature film, and I had to go back and actually think about that, uh, because I know that their first feature-length film was Snow White, even though they showed Steamboat Willie as their uh, as their uh, as their example. Uh, Although that was Disney's first film. Uh, anyway, it's just kind of an interesting little side note. Um, but I definitely could probably try to name all of the Disney animated films, starting with the most recent. Um, but it's difficult because uh, where do you draw the distinction? Because there's Pixar, and Pixar isn't really Disney at a certain point, but I'm sure that they want to count those since they produced them. And then, of course, a lot of people get confused with all of the other CGI movies coming out. Tangled actually was not Pixar, and it had a very distinctively different style. It's interesting that Disney Animation Studios has gone completely CGI instead of traditional hand-drawn animation, which is really where they made their name. Unfortunately, I actually like the older Disney animation styles. I think that later films that used the traditional style and were animated by American animators, such as The Black Cauldron and The Great Mouse Detective, were dramatically underrated. Not to mention The Brave Little Toaster, which was Disney's last animated feature film uh, before they made The Little Mermaid. And all three of the ones I just mentioned before The Little Mermaid were incredibly dark. Um, just for example, in The Black Cauldron, one of the main characters, a cute, furry little uh, guy that you're just adoring from the very beginning of the film, he dies. Bit of a spoiler there. I'm sorry, but uh, it's one of the only movies in which a character actually a main character actually dies and doesn't come back, doesn't get resuscitated somehow. He just flat out dies, and it's a sad part to the story, and it had a lot of the kids crying. Another film, Oliver and Company, had wonderful music sung by Billy Joel, no less, but just didn't quite make its mark as they were hoping. Uh, and I find it rather unfortunate because I thought that Oliver and Company had great music. Um, the plot I don't really remember anything about, but you know, if you're gonna go see an animated musical, you're basically watching it for the music and the songs, especially if it's a Disney musical. One of my favorites is still the big main number, which is Why Should I Worry? Anyway, um, and that one actually centers around a homeless guy uh, as one of the characters, voiced by Dom DeLuise. So, um, just kind of an odd situation. Didn't really have characters that really drew you in, I suppose. That aside, um, the uh, the Great Mouse Detective had this one scary, creepy bat character, which I reviewed in a previous review, um, that kept shoving his fanged face into the camera and going blah 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 blah, and scaring the crap out of the little ones. So, uh, why do I consider these great? It's because um, they weren't as formulaic. They didn't rely as much on things. Oh, and of course, the Brave Little Toaster I forgot completely about. That one actually has like nightmare scenes. Uh, and I remember watching it as a kid, and there were some parts that were very scary. Uh, there was like a clown that was like going to jab forks into the toaster so that it would short circuit, or drop it in the water so that it would die, and it was having all these nightmares and everything. And at one point they showed these appliances, being alive, living entities, and and then it it shows this fix-it guy actually ripping the appliance apart like it was brutally mutilating it, and it's just like, man. Uh, and while it's a very materialistic film saying, oh, you know, you need these things, it's at the same time a very anti consumerist film because it says you don't need new things, you don't need high tech things when you have, um, you know, older things that are still working. And and I like that, you know, because that says, okay, go take a look at older stuff. You know, it may not be the newest, latest thing, but it does the job. You know, get get something used, get something old. If it still works, if it does you fine, good. And you know, it's really great. They even have like an old clock radio, alarm clock, um, and an old desk lamp, of course the old toaster, and the old vacuum cleaner, and the old electric blanket, and even the old air conditioner. And you know, you don't throw them out; you just repair them as they need it. Um, and you know, the whole built-in obsolescence kind of idea in appliances and electronics and electrics um, is really not the smartest way because it wastes resources. Sure, you have to go and purchase a new one, uh, but you waste so many resources. And that's one of the reasons why I am always hesitant to go and buy a new electric doodad or a new electronic doodad. I would so much rather just have the one I have work. That's why I'm very particular about my cell phones. I want one that's reliable and isn't going to stop working for me after so long. Anyway, all of that aside, um, I do have to say that Tangled was actually pretty good because it showed just kind of it did have some consideration into its design. They talked about all the different kinds of stuff that Rapunzel does indoors and how uh, you know, a lot of people speculate that she would be reading books, but if she were reading books her whole life while she was there, it would have been the same books over and over and over again. She'd have to have a much larger library in that tower in order to really be entertained. Um, and so she's just read the same three books ever since she was a little girl. On the other hand, she paints, she does various crafts, she bakes and um, you know, cleans and everything, and so she, you know, knows how to take care of herself. Um, I liked how they made a point of her actually having flat feet because if she were running around with shoes most of her life, she wouldn't have healthy arches or something. She would have very flat feet from walking on floorboards all the time. And you know, I won't say that it was really as good as some of the stuff because the way that they did some of the quick, fast gestures was a little bit um, too. It made it a little bit too modern in styling. Um, Admittedly, it's a modern movie, so it shouldn't all just be, you know, she's walking arms out like a pageant princess. But at the same time, you do have to wonder, uh, you know, just how they're telling the story and whether or not uh, the different stuff that they're doing really moves it along. Uh, Anthropomorphizing the horse too much, I think, was a bit of a mistake. Um, Giving it character is not a problem, but when you give it too much facial expression, human facial expression, as opposed to horse facial expression, uh, you know, I would actually be so bold as to say, hey, how about you actually, um, you know, maybe talk to people who work around horses and find out what kind of gestures most horses give to express what they can discern as a particular feeling. Such as, a dog will tilt its head to the side when it's confused, whereas an anthropomorphized dog in like a Disney film will raise its eyebrow when a dog can't really do that. Um, a dog will tilt its head sideways and look at you strangely, and perk its ears up, usually, and be like, "What is that? What's with that thing?" You know. You have to actually study the behavior of an animal if you're going to have it accurately portrayed, and that was where I like, by comparison, the film Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron. They anthropomorphized the animals a little bit, but they really tried to keep the behavior more like that of an actual horse. They studied footage of horses. They tried to make it as realistic as possible for being an animated feature. And this was the same company that around the same time released the film The Iron Giant, which had the very old school Disney style and is often mistaken for Disney, but is in fact a Warner Brothers animated feature. And in fact, although it's rather sad, both films were produced, both films were highly successful and gained a cult following, including by this person. Um, uh, and both were just the studio decided after those two that they wouldn't produce any more animated films, which is really tragic. Um, 20th Century Fox around the same time released Titan AE, which featured an all-star cast, including Matt Damon, Drew Barrymore, Bill Pullman, uh, John Leguizamo. Uh, Goodness, who else? Janine Garofalo and what's his name? Nathan Lane. Uh, and Ron Perlman, as I remember. Uh, and Tone Loc. Uh, I think that's almost the entire cast, in fact, um, did all these voices, and they did a wonderful job of it. It's one of those animated features that I also have a copy of. I'm sure I've done a review on it already. But that being said, um, I have to say that Tangled suits Disney's more modern style. It kind of relates a little bit to the sort of direction they went with The Emperor's New Groove, which I actually liked, but I liked it because it was animated, not CGI. I don't care that much for CGI anymore after watching some of the stuff that I've seen lately, where it seems to be kind of a lazy way of doing it because you have a 3D rendered environment with models, and you can just stick those models in there and move them around any old way you please, uh, just as if it were claymation, only it's much easier than claymation because you don't have to do it frame by frame. Uh, you just kind of have preset motions that uh, they can do, and yeah, it's becoming a bit of a lazy way of animating films. They can make it as realistic or as unrealistic or as somewhere in between as they want, and anthropomorphize animals. They can make people more animalistic. Um, that's always been a feature of animation in general, but I don't think that it's necessarily a good thing to go all the way computer graphics. I liked what they did in The Triplets of Belleville, where they went mostly hand-drawn animation and only went with computer graphics animation when it was necessary, just because uh, it gave it enough of the proper feel, and it didn't distract too much. You could still tell when a lot of it was 3D computer graphics, but it still didn't interfere with the storytelling. It just made the spectacle a little bit more alluring and drew you in a bit more. All of that aside, moving on to, I think, a much better example of use of computer graphics imaging is uh, the Chronicles of Narnia, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Now, this is, I actually think, one of the best stories in the Chronicles of Narnia. Uh, I remember watching the BBC version that they adapted, and it was still the best of the lot. Um, the Silver Chair was an excellent story as well, but it wasn't quite. Um, it didn't quite have the scope of being on a voyage and landing on different islands and going on an adventure. I think that that's a very classical storytelling device going all the way back to the Odyssey, Gulliver's Travels, um, some of the Norse sagas, uh, and I'm trying to think if there are any others. But it mostly goes back to the Odyssey and later on Gulliver's Travels, and even in modern science fiction with shows like Star Trek, uh, where you're going to a different world, encountering a new, different scenario or creature or culture, and learning how to adapt and survive through that adventure. So what ends up happening there is you have a better plot telling device that eventually moves them towards their end goal. And I loved that Liam Neeson is the voice of Aslan. Uh, it's so funny that people would try and say that it's some kind of pagan film, and when it by saying that it has naiads and dryads and fauns and uh, animals talking and various things, that it's more of a druid kind of deal. But in fact, it plays heavily into British mythos um, and everything. So I really have to say that it's ironic because Aslan totally represents uh, the Christian God from the British, uh, symbology, where the lion was God. The lion was, the king. That's where we get the term the king of the beasts, is from uh, sort of British mythos, uh, because there were lions in Britain and France, but largely in Britain they had survived, and they just uh, were thriving there for thousands and thousands of years before finally being wiped out. But you had lion attacks for centuries before they were finally wiped out. But the lion was still kept as the symbol of Britain for a long time, and it's only unfortunate that there are no uh, specimens, wild or otherwise, of British lions, because it would be interesting to note the differences. That aside, gone way off on a tangent. I think that the Voyage of the Dawn Treader was excellently executed, as they've been doing with the entire Chronicles of Narnia series. Uh, I'm sad that it would dissuade kids from reading the books, most likely. Um, Personally, I enjoy reading books like Harry Potter. I don't enjoy reading books like J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings trilogy. I do enjoy uh, reading The Hitchhiker's Guide, uh, but not some other uh, novel series or something. Uh, I'm finicky about what I do and do not like to read, as I'm sure most of us are. Um, but I would not object to reading um, the Chronicles of Narnia. But I would want to start with The Magician's Nephew, which is actually the first story in the saga. Um, and tells you kind of about how Narnia became, just how Narnia came to be. So all that aside, I think that Voyage of the Dawn Treader is great. I cannot wait for them to come out with the Silver Chair because I really loved the Silver Chair. I never got to watch uh, the Silver Chair as a kid. I got to watch um, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader once in a while. They would normally show only The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and sometimes Prince Caspian, but rarely then. And you would occasionally see it on PBS. That was where I'd be able to watch it. And my brother, being the wonderful big brother that he was, would always just be like, "No, don't watch it. It's cheesy and hokey or whatever." And I'd be like, mm. And the irony is, he read the books. He had the entire collection. Uh, and of course, I couldn't read them. But uh, so he knew what the books were all about. He wouldn't share them with me. He wouldn't let me watch the movies that were being produced by that had been produced by the BBC back in the 80s. Like I cared if the special effects were cheap. Like I cared uh, if it looked like crap or whatever. I wanted to see it. Anyway, uh, I think that the special effects were great. I think they did a great. I think they do a great job of not anthropomorphizing the animals too much. They make them talk, but they give them the mannerisms of animals at the same time. The mouse has mannerisms of a mouse, and that obviously comes from C.S. Lewis's writing um, as your starting point. He's not going to write about animals acting exactly like people. They're going to act like animals. Um, it's just generally a great uh, storytelling. You feel like you've gone on this epic saga of a trip, and you actually see the characters develop and change through the story. So the acting's really good. Um, I do think it's a little bit sad that the character of Lucy actually feels like she's not attractive. Uh, when I always thought that the actress they had playing Lucy was much cuter, uh, as little girls go, than the girl they had playing Susan, who, yeah, she's pretty in her own way, but uh, there's always something about um, you know younger women with larger eyes that tends to be more attractive somehow. Um, but then again, the upturned nose that the young actress has, probably I know that they probably emphasized it a little bit with the angles they would shoot her from when they wanted to have her look a bit uglier. But in the rest of the movie, she was very cute and very pretty, as little girls are. And so, I just felt bad that they kind of uh, and they weren't really saying she was ugly, just that from her point of view, she wasn't as pretty as her older sister. Um, but I loved the part where Aslan comes in and says, "You saw yourself as unworthy. You wished yourself away," and that's a great lesson for the kids. That you're worthwhile. Uh, don't wish to be anyone but yourself. Uh, don't force yourself to live up to somebody else's standards. Just try and be the best you. It's a great lesson for the kids, and they don't need to be beaten over the head religiously with it. Uh, with some kind of religious ideology in order to feel good about who they are, uh, you know, and they can realize that part of the message in religion in general is an important one to have, and you don't necessarily. I'm not gonna push my religious beliefs on you, but Um, but I think it's important to uh, give a kid a sense of worth um, and value in themselves. Uh, Not that they're the most important person, but that they should take care of themselves and so forth, and that they should value who they are and find their own value and validate themselves instead of feeling uh, like they need to be something they're not. Uh, so that being said, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, highly, highly recommended. I'm gonna give it the same rating as Nanny McPhee Returns, 4.5 out of 5. Um, it's not for everyone. It's not for little kids. There is violence. It's rated PG, so uh, don't show it to the little ones. But on the other hand, your 10 to 15-year-olds, even your late teenagers, will probably adore it. Um, as will the whole family, I'm sure, the elderly, the grown-ups. It has a great sense of adventure. I think when the Silver Chair comes out, it's going to have a great fun. I'm sure they've probably already started filming and have picked out a wonderful actor to play Puddleglum, who is one of my favorite characters from the series. Um, in the original BBC television production, uh, he was played by Tom Baker, better known as the fourth Doctor Who, also one of the longest running Doctor Who actors, and easily one of the funnest. Uh, as they noted, all teeth and curls. But he's just a wonderful actor, and I can only hope that they found someone equally wonderful to play Puddleglum. So that being said, later on I'll be discussing Jonah Hex. That'll be in just a minute.